Welcome to the Pat Imig Sports Network, broadcasting from Imig AI Studios in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, your host, Pat Imig.
Welcome into the show, ladies and gentlemen. It's football on the Pat Imig Sports Network. My name is Pat Imig, and I am joined by the pro football guru, Russell Baxter, who's covered the NFL for more than 40 years, more than 2 decades at ESPN on Mike and Mike, NFL Primetime. And right now you can find him on SI covering the Seattle Seahawks, Los Angeles Chargers, Buffalo Bills, and Carolina Panthers, all four who could very well be playing in the postseason. We're down to the final 16 games of the regular season. It's week 18. And those Carolina Panthers have a date with destiny with the Tampa Bay Bucks. The winner becomes the NFC South champion unless the Atlanta Falcons defeat the New Orleans Saints, at which point all three teams are 8-9. And the tiebreaker goes to Carolina. So even if Carolina loses to Tampa Bay this weekend and the Saints lose to the Falcons, the Panthers are still the champions of the NFC South. Does that all make sense to you, Russell?
Well, it does make sense because it is the NFC South. And a couple of years ago, in Tom Brady's final season, the Buccaneers were an 8-9 division winner. So, and that's not unusual. We saw Washington win the division. The NFC East with a losing record. We saw Carolina win the NFC South when Ron Rivera was there with a losing record. They started off horrible, got highlighted, and won a playoff game eventually. So, yeah, it's the NFC South where winning more than 10 games hasn't happened since, I think, 2021.
Which would have been that was the Brady Super Bowl year, correct?
No, that was Brady. That was the following year. 2020 was the Super Bowl year. 2021, I believe them and the Packers had the best record, at least in the NFC. And that was the year, that was the Cooper Kupp year, where Cooper Kupp did everything. And the Rams had a big lead on them in the divisional playoffs. Tampa Bay came all the way back. And then all of a sudden, here comes Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, 2 long completions late in the game, set up a field goal and dethroned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then they beat the Niners in the NFC title game. Then they beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl. I think there was the last 3 playoff games they won by 3 points, 3 points, and 3 points.
I would expect more of the close games in the playoffs this year, especially with the way defenses are. I don't want to necessarily say dominating, but I feel like the defenses are dictating a lot of what we're seeing this season. So before we get into the 3 marquee divisional matchups for the weekend of week 18, it's still kind of hard for me to say week 18 because I'm so used to saying week 17 for the final week, but it is week 18. What we saw in week 17 of this year, just a few days ago, we saw the Falcons defeat the Rams on Monday Night Football. That was something that we talked about at the end of the show last week. So now the Falcons have beaten the Bucks in prime time. They've beaten the Bills in prime time. They beat the Rams in prime time. And the common thread in 2 of those games, at least, was Bijan Robinson going crazy. And then you had Pitts, the tight end, I believe, who went crazy against the Bucks for the Falcons.
Yep.
So all of this leads to the weekend. And right now, I'm surprised that Carolina is according to the spreads and the odds makers, from what I'm seeing right now as of this recording, Carolina is a 3.5-point underdog at Tampa Bay. And I think that maybe it's just because people still value the home field advantage a little bit more than really what it's worth. I think that you've talked about that this year, that home field isn't necessarily what it used to be, whether it's the playoffs or the regular season. So I like the Panthers in this game simply because it follows your trend that you pointed out of win-loss, 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 but it also makes, Tampa Bay's defense has been their Achilles heel. I know their offense has kind of sputtered too, but all things being equal, if both teams play their game, I feel like Carolina has the advantage to play more physical and kind of run it down their throats. So I would take Carolina if I was a betting man, but you've been covering the Panthers all year, obviously keeping an eye on the Bucs too, because it's the same division. So where does this game line up for you? What do you make of everything? What stands out?
Well, you brought up a good point about home field advantage, by the way. Each of the last 2 weeks in the league, home teams are 6-10. So that's
Wow.
12-20 the last 2 weeks for home teams. Um, yeah, it's funny. Alternating wins and losses now 10 games in a row. So, so common sense says that Carolina wins and then loses in the playoffs, which would keep the trend obviously continuing as well. But the one thing that stands out to me about Carolina all year is an offensive line that has overcome a lot of injuries, mostly because Dan Morgan kept them together, not only the starters, but the backups as well. And they've all kind of stood in. But, was it a case last week where they ran it? I want to say uh, Carolina, I think, had 136 yards of total offense, which was a season low for them. Now, it wasn't that long ago they had 175 yards of offense at home against the Saints. And I find it ironic the two hottest teams in the NFC South right now are actually Atlanta and New Orleans, who play this week, but they're both playing very, very good, very, very good football. And it just goes to show you, people who like to look at schedules, well, they got nothing to play for. It just never works that way. But Tampa Bay is in a major tailspin. Now losing to Miami, and just finding ways almost to lose games. They're not getting blown out. They're losing a lot of field goal games and 1 point games and so on. So, but you talked about their defense, Pat, and that is a problem from them. And their running game, because of the injuries this year to Bucky Irving, didn't have the same real spark. Mike Evans was out for a while. So, if Tampa Bay wins, that's 5 division titles in a row. It keeps them alive. Right now, the Eagles have the longest active playoff winning streak in the NFC. If Tampa Bay wins, they would continue. It'd be 6 years in a row the Bucs be in the playoffs. So, but Baker Mayfield's taken a little bit of a beating again this year, and we have seen at times the last couple of weeks the Panthers' young players, Lathan Ransom, the safety from Ohio State, had the big pick against Baker Mayfield. Nick Scorton, pass rusher from Texas A&M. The young defensive players. And Bryce Young, up until last week, it was playing arguably the best football of his career. No turnovers in 3 straight games, 6 touchdown passes. He was a big factor in beating the Rams, especially on 4th down. And then it all came apart. So I almost want to chalk up last week to that Seattle defense, because Carolina held Seattle under 300 yards of total offense. And I know this is going to be shocking for you, but Sam Darnold turned over the ball a couple of times. By the way, Sam Darnold has 20 turnovers this year, which is more than he had last year. In fact, it's a career high. But we're not talking about Seattle. We'll get to them in a second. I agree with you. I think Carolina is just. I think this helps Carolina that they're playing at Tampa and not the anticipation. I think they might have psyched themselves out a little bit. Obviously, that was one of the biggest games in the last 10 years. They haven't won the division in 10 years. They haven't been in the playoffs in 8 years. And maybe a little too big for them, but I think being away from home, maybe a little less pressure, play the underdog card. And by the way, the Bucs have already lost to the Saints and the Falcons at home this year.
So it stands to reason that the Panthers would also beat them at their home base.
Of course, the Panthers also got swept by the Saints, but I won't let facts get in the way of anything. So,
well, I think, but to follow up on that, it's the cynics can. It's easy to laugh and be like, "Oh, it's the NFC South; these teams suck," and well, they're all beating up on each other.
Exactly,
that's really what it comes down to. And the Saints. Here we are talking about them, they're surging right now. What they're doing reminds me of what the Panthers did last year at this time.
Right. Well, they won 4 of their last 9 games. They won 4 of their last 9 games last year. Bryce Young kind of turned his career around, frankly, last year. So no, you bring up a good point. I'm not. There's nothing bad about what the Saints are doing. In fact, I think you and I talked earlier in the year that maybe they were a little better than their record indicated. They played the Cardinals tough in week 1. They almost beat the Niners in week 2. I mean, they have a new head coach in Kellen Moore, first time NFL head coach. And Tyler Shuck has been tremendous. He has shown a lot of bravado. He's not afraid to throw the ball downfield. Him and Chris Olave have had some big plays the last 5 or 6 weeks. They played at Tennessee last week, and Tennessee right now. They're having their own issues, but they can be a little feisty. But they made the plays late in the game. So Kellen Moore's got a nice thing going around, little thing going around, and that thing about beating each other up, very reminiscent of a lot of years in the AFC North with the Steelers and the Browns and the Bengals and the Ravens all beating each other. I think there was a year not too long ago where the AFC North, every team in the AFC North was 3-3 in the division.
So
yeah,
the comparison stands. So I think you mentioned Seattle and what they did to Carolina. And then I also look at what Seattle did to the Rams in that first time they played when they actually lost, but they still held the Rams, I think, to like 249 yards of offense.
Right.
To me, Seattle's the most complete team in the NFL because it starts with the defense. Their special teams is phenomenal. They made their special teams even better when they acquired Fahid right before the trade deadline hit. And to me, it just comes down to who you mentioned earlier, the man who's got 20 turnovers this year, Sam Darnold. So they play San Francisco. It's a great slate for Saturday. You got the Panthers and Bucks, and then cap off Saturday with the battle for the NFC West and the first round bye, the number 1 seed, Seattle at San Francisco. I feel like Seattle, even with the Darnold issue, again, if he can turn it over once or twice and keep it below that, I feel like it's Seattle's game to lose at that point. I also think one thing that, we've talked also about San Francisco, the defense, there's not really a pass rush when you lose Fred Warner, when you lose Bosa. Obviously, that's going to have a negative impact. So, defensively, I feel like San Francisco's definitely weak there. Saw what the Bears did to them on Sunday night. And then the other aspect to me is Brock Purdy, who great quarterback, but I'm not comparing him to Kurt Warner, but there's an element of Kurt Warner when I watch him, and it's more on the negative side. Kurt Warner wasn't afraid to throw an interception because he was not afraid to throw it in between 3 defenders because he's that confident in his ball, right? That's a great thing, but it can also be a detriment. I think Brock Purdy turned it over a couple times last week. He started the game with that pick 6. So I think that a lot of the talking heads outside of you and me will probably be talking a lot about Darnold, but Brock Purdy's got a penchant for turning the ball over too.
Oh no!
And if he does that this week, and he turned it over 4 or 5 times, I feel like, against Carolina, which similar styled team as far as just try to beat you up physically. I like Seattle in this game. I know they're favored. I think they've been the better, more complete team all year, even with Darnold. I think that you can get Brock Purdy to pull a few same old Sam type plays as well, which I don't think people will be talking about that quite as much leading into that game.
Well, the Seahawks road record under Mike McDonald is unbelievable in 2 years. They've only lost 2 road games, a Monday nighter at Detroit and the Rams game a couple of weeks ago at SoFi Stadium. They beat the Rams at the end of the year last year at SoFi. But Darnold sat out. But they won at San Francisco. I know it was a down year for San Francisco. And of course, the Seahawks, not necessarily the juggernaut they used to be at home. In fact, remember, this is a bookend game for the Niners and the Seahawks. They began the season in Seattle. The Niners beat them. This is why we talk about Sam Darnold the way we talk about him. Drove down the field, dropped back the pass, ball hit one of his offensive linemen, fumble, Nick Bosa recovers, Niners win 17-13. So there was a lot of curiosity about Seattle coming in, but that defense has really become a very, very fierce unit. Again, they held Carolina to 136 total yards, and now as of late this year they've kind of started getting the takeaways. But the thing that's most dangerous about Seattle right now is how they've turned on the running game with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker III. Early in the first 8 games of the year, they were averaging about 104 yards per game on the ground. Last 8 games, like a buck 36 on the ground. Over 100 yards, 7 and 8 games. The first 8 games of the season, Pat, they got held under 100 yards rushing 4 times. So very up and down, very inconsistent. But when you can play defense and you can control the clock, I mean, you don't have to really know football to know that's a good thing.
Right.
And Mike, but there's a quiet confidence to them. And we talk about the Sam Darnold turnovers, and yet they managed to overcome them for the most part. But he hasn't been sharp the last 8 games, I would say, or last 6 games.
I would agree.
Even the week before, I think the week before the Rams game was the Cardinals game, which they won handily, but he had 3 turnovers in that game as well. I mean, 20 turnovers is 20 turnovers. Okay. So, and
I think the recipe, I agree with you about the run game for Seattle, just having watched them the last 3 weeks now. Charbonnet has a way, and I always want to say Charbonnet like he's a hockey player. He's got a nose for the end zone somehow, some way. He just finds a way to kind of like wiggle and get his way across the goal line. And then Walker's got amazing speed. He's able to make, a 2-yard loss, turn that into a 6-yard gain. So I think the recipe is pretty simple against San Francisco. If you can run the ball enough, regardless of the yards,
right,
and keep Darnold. If Sam Darnold drops back to pass between 20 and 25 times, I think that's a great recipe for Seattle to win the game.
Yeah, go back to the running game for a second. Kenneth Walker had over 100 yards rushing against the Rams. Last week, Charbonnet had over 100 yards rushing against the Panthers. So it's a nice little 1-2 punch they got going there. And again, that should make life easier. The thing with Darnold also is, you'll see him rebound from these mistakes. I remember when Andrew Luck was in the league, and people talked a lot about Andrew Luck and his comebacks. And he did have comebacks, but numerous times the reason he had comebacks is because he was actually the person to put them in the hole to begin with. Like it was almost like my bad. And then he would rescue them. So I'm not going to go that far with Darnold. I mean, he's had the second straight Pro Bowl season, and has obviously turned his career around with 2 different teams. But he has slowed up a little. He's I don't know if I would say, I don't know if frantic would be the word, maybe trying to do too much. It was nice to see. I mean, Jackson Smith and Najee Buzz, leading the league in receiving yards. And in some ways, I don't know if they've really found a second wide receiver. I mean, obviously Cooper Kupp is there and so on. AJ Barner caught a touchdown pass the tight end. He's been effective for them. So remember, this is also the first year of Clint Kubiak in Seattle, even though he had prior experience with Sam Darnold in San Francisco when they were there for a cup of coffee. We've heard that he had a cup of coffee with the Niners. I'm more apt to believe it's San Francisco, Pat. So I think he had a bowl of Cioppino with a little sourdough on the side.
Some good seafood. Sam Darnold, I saw this yesterday, so I'm reading from it. One of 5 quarterbacks to have consecutive 13-win seasons. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Brett Favre are the other 4 of the modern era. And in Darnold's case, he did it with different teams. So it's just kind of fascinating because that's just proof that, number one, he does have game. We know that. First-round pick. but also he's been on some quality teams too. That Vikings team last year and then the Seahawks team this year, very similarly built as far as, great defense, get you with special teams, and then big up front. So with all that said, I still like Seattle in that game.
I do too.
I think that you're just looking at, who's been the best throughout the entirety of the year, who's been the better team. And like you pointed out, the 49ers beat Seattle 17-13 earlier in the year. Early in the year, it's always kind of more of a crapshoot, and that wasn't like it was a blowout game. It wasn't as if San Francisco, the offense was a juggernaut in that game either. So,
well, and I will also throw this out here that the Seahawks have lost 3 games this year by a total of 9 points. So it's not, listen, they got nothing but field goals against the Colts, but found a way. But a 4-point loss to the Niners, a 3-point loss to the Bucs when the Bucs were scoring points. Both of those at home, and then the 2-point loss at SoFi, in which Jason Myers missed the 61-yard field goal, and they would have knocked him off, despite the 4 interceptions by Darnold. So I would have said a couple of weeks ago, I think the Rams have been the most steady team in the league. Maybe, but New England to me is like the calmest 13-3 team in the league. And
Drake
like I said,
plays differently.
Seattle's. I don't mean this in a bad way. A little noisier because of I think they play defense with a certain kind of violence that.
Yeah, they're tackling. I haven't seen the team, and granted, I haven't watched all 32 teams as much as watching the Seahawks because I purposely made a point to watch them this year. But their tackling is phenomenal.
Yes.
It's not just the flying to the ball. It's also they don't really miss.
Right.
Ernest Jones, phenomenal to watch. If there's an open field for a running back or a receiver, somehow that guy gets the job done every time. So they're definitely more violent, but the tackling is always there. So leading up to the main event on Sunday night, I guess, you've got the AFC North up for grabs. It's either going to be a 10-7 Pittsburgh team or a 9-8 Baltimore team. Felt like Pittsburgh really missed DK Metcalf in that loss to Cleveland. It was almost like tough to watch Aaron Rodgers throwing to whoever he could find. I guess it was Scantling that was mainly the guy. But they definitely missed him in that game. They're going to miss him in this game. And yet, I don't know. I still feel like this would be the Pittsburgh thing to do, would be to win this game. I don't know, though. I'm not going to be shocked by what happens. I wouldn't pick either team. If I'm a betting man, I don't pick either of these teams to win. But where do you see this game lining up? I was surprised to see Baltimore run through Green Bay the way they did, especially knowing that you didn't have Lamar playing. So for Henry to run 36 times for over 200 was pretty damning if you're a Green Bay fan. But sticking with the Ravens and Steelers, where are you with this game? Can you make sense of any of it?
Well, we've seen what Derrick Henry in that running game has done to the Steelers the last year and a half. Late in the season last year, in the playoffs, which I think they got 299. I believe they had over 200, even though they lost to Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago. I always describe Derrick Henry as 3 guys who were helping a friend push a refrigerator up a ramp. And one of the friends lets go. And here he comes. And here comes, I mean, he's a power runner upright. A lot of these power runners over the years, the Earl Campbells and the Mike Allstotts and guys like that, who lower the shoulder. Derrick Henry doesn't necessarily lower the shoulder. It's almost as if it had to do is you're in my way and I'm just going to keep going. So I mean, we remember Eric Dickerson was a very upright runner. For a power runner, Derrick Henry is, like I said, and there is a I think a desire in him earlier in the season, some fumbling problems, which has never been his calling card. He has climbed his way up the all-time rushing ranks. And you get a hot runner like this, like a Terrell Davis in 1998, a John Riggins in 1982, Saquon Barkley last year in the playoffs, if they make the playoffs. And I know there's been a lot of noise about Lamar and all that. Now, I will say this, the Ravens defense, I don't think strikes fear into a lot of people.
I
Not
would
like
agree.
it was a couple of years ago when Mike McDonald was there. And Malik Willis really kind of toyed with them. A lot of big plays, a lot of deep downfield passes, not so much the running game, but really, they had trouble with the Green Bay receivers. Now, I don't know where the Pittsburgh Steelers receivers came, but I will say this, it's a rivalry game. These games are usually a field goal or less for the most part. There's always something drama at the end. Um, I'm just Pittsburgh is the underdog at home. We saw that with the Colts earlier this year. And we've seen it over the years a few times. Now, I will also say that the Steelers have stunk up the joint late in seasons the last couple of years as well, and especially in the playoffs. And they, for as vibrant on offense as they looked against the Lions, and I know Metcalf played in that game, but Kenneth Gainwell was really the guy, and Jaylen Warren with two 45-yard touchdown runs and so on. And yet they had to hold on for dear life, which seems like their calling card. But I mean, that's going to be a frantic it's going to be a frantic stadium, and one way or the other, because if they win and they wind up, and there's going to be that trepidation that that they make the playoffs again, and they've lost their last 6 playoff games, and some of them really bad. But if they lose and they lose to the Ravens and they're out, I don't know what that place is going to be like, because we saw the Buffalo game 4 or 5 weeks ago where they were screaming for Tomlin's head. So I don't know.
It's going to be
entertaining.
It's going to be great entertainment one way or the other.
Yeah. The problem is with both of these teams is neither one of them has shown any consistency. Baltimore got off to a slow start, and even they got off to a slow start even with Lamar. Okay, then they had the winning streak, and then that, to me, the game where they lost at home to Cincinnati on Thanksgiving night really was a strange loss for them. They wind up digging themselves a little bit of a hole. Now, Pittsburgh had a chance to close the door last week against the Browns and looked as ineffective as offense as they did all year. I don't have a real feel on this one, because I don't know which version of the Ravens or which version of the Steelers is going to show up. If I were a betting man, I think I'd bet the under. I'll just leave it at that. So,
yeah, I think the more I think of it, and I like the idea of the Steelers actually being able to run the ball on Baltimore, despite the not having Metcalf, but
right.
They can do a repeat of what they did against Detroit with Gainwell and Warren. For what it's worth, we just, at the top of the conversation, we're pointing out home field advantage isn't what it used to be, but take this for what it is. I believe in the last 5 games at Pittsburgh between the Ravens and Steelers are 4-1. Ravens obviously 1-4. So there's that aspect too. But again, what is home field advantage anymore? What's it good for? Who knows? So aside from the rest of the weekend, I'm curious right now, and this may change, by the time we talk next week, because we may get another classic this weekend. If you were going to rank the top 3 games of the year, and it doesn't have to be final, but like for me, I was thinking about the top games that I've seen this year. Seattle and the Rams, week 16, obviously is up there. I think Seattle and the Bucs earlier, I think that was week 5. That was a fantastic shootout. And then if you want to go defense, maybe it's recency bias, but I thought that Bears-Packers game right before Christmas was exciting in its own way. And then I think there's a lot of fans out there from Dallas, obviously, that think that Cowboys-Eagles game was one of the best of the year. But what games, when you look at this season, if it ended today, Russell, if there was no Week 18, what would be your top game of the season?
Well, I agree with you that the Rams-Seattle game, the 38-37 overtime, because it had a little. Well, I can't say it had a little bit of everything. It had a lot of everything, and a weird 2-point conversion. Successful where a punt return for a touchdown, a big fourth quarter rally by Seattle against a quarterback who, since he joined the Rams, the Seahawks had not been able to beat. If if you're into that QB wins thing and so on, so I would agree that it's two teams that are not going to the playoffs. But I go back early in the season, the overtime. It was overtime, I believe. The Cowboys and the Giants, when Russell Wilson was just slinging downfield and nothing made a lot of sense, and Dallas eventually won the game. We know how bad the Giants.
I'm laughing because it's just like crazy that game even happened.
Right.
Just
and I know that.
Seems
and
like
of course, the Cowboys had the 40-40 overtime tie as well. I also thought that, and again, it was a game with a comeback. That Thursday night Falcons Buccaneers game, in which Kirk Cousins got hot and Kyle Pitts had a huge game, and the fact that the Falcons, with nothing to play for, went for two and got it. Unlike the Bills last week, who, if Josh Allen just thrown a better pass, they might have gotten it. So, and we see a lot of that now. We see a lot of teams willing to do that, because now fourth down conversions have become a big part of the game. And not just the Lions, everybody. You don't. You don't take for granted anybody's going to punt anymore. So
I do think I tend to generally agree with 70% of the times that these coaches go for it, because it's normally a 4th and 1, 4th and 2.
Right.
But the Monday night game with the Falcons and Rams, I didn't understand at all. The Rams go for it after they had just been stuffed on the ground on 3rd and 2. They lose a yard and they go for it and miss it. If they kick a field goal there, then, they don't need to try to kick a field goal with 10 seconds to go, even though, I know they didn't have that attempt because they didn't make it to that spot. But I think sometimes these coaches bite themselves in the butt with it. Now, they did stop the Falcons on that recurring possession and then drive down and score. But who's to say they wouldn't have driven down and score after kicking a field goal? So that's always fun to watch. All right, so then last two things. It seems like the MVP conversation and the Coach of the Year conversation is always way more exciting before it's actually announced, because once it's announced, people stop talking about it and no longer care. But do you have a Coach of the Year that's a front runner? There's 5 guys you could probably pick from. Who do you think wins it, I guess? All things being equal, if things played out after this weekend.
He's not a first-time head coach, but it's first season with the team. What Mike Vrabel's been able to do so quickly in New England is pretty extraordinary. And again, not the strongest division, but it was, for 20 years, it wasn't the strongest division.
That's right.
They have a chance to win 14 games a year after winning 4 games, which would tie the NFL record for the biggest turnaround in one season in NFL history. It was first achieved by the Colts with Peyton Manning. And then some people forget this. The Dolphins were 1-15 in 2007. They were 11-5 in 2008. In fact, it's the last time Miami won the AFC East. So that would be pretty remarkable. And since we're in Foxborough, we might as well take a look at one of the most steady performers in the league this year in Drake May, who had some turnover issues early in the season. You almost find it hard to believe they lost to the Raiders in week 1 in Foxborough. They had the 5 turnover game against Pittsburgh in Foxborough. And since then, they've lost 1 game. Ironically, at home to the Bills. But that brings up another point. The Patriots undefeated on the road this year, which again, pretty impressive for a second-year quarterback and a head coach with a new team. And it's not like Mike Grable doesn't know Foxborough.
Right.
This was a team that um, has drafted well the last 2 years and been helped. You're picking as high up as they had. Back to back 4-13 seasons, and the thing also that strikes me about New England is there's almost a little methodical, nothing flashy. All of a sudden it's 7-0 and it's 14-0, and they just kind of go about their business. There's not a lot of rah-rah, and Mike Grable's probably the most emotional guy on the sidelines, and he's not overly emotional and so on. But Drake May is just very calm, cool, and collected, for lack of a better description.
There's something about the way he plays that's just different than other quarterbacks too. I mean, right. It's weird. It's like he's able to move and wiggle away from defenders a lot differently than any other quarterback in the game. I'm with you on both of those. And to the people that talk about the strength of schedule, they didn't pick the strength. They didn't pick their schedule, number one. Number two, when you defeat everybody in your division, 5 out of 6 times, that's going to obviously impact their records. And then the third thing is, this is something I learned, I was looking at earlier, because there's a lot of debate about, should it be Stafford or May when it comes to the MVP? Well, the Rams played a much tougher schedule. Well, there's 6 games that both of those teams have played against the common opponents. The Patriots are 6-0, the Rams are 4-2. So I think that kind of shuts down the strength of schedule argument. But
well, the strength that, listen,
all told,
here's the biggest problem that you find with the MVP is the MVP discussion goes on for, I'd say, the final 7 or 8 weeks of the season. Okay, who did you vote? Because some people apparently have already got their votes in already, which I find ludicrous. For a while there, we thought it might be Jonathan Taylor.
Right.
Then, Matthew Stafford is obviously, he came up, and it's been a rough couple of weeks for him, which is, I would behoove people to understand that it's a season award. It's not a 3-month award. Okay. Yeah. So it's not most valuable part-timer. It's most valuable player. And, you just look at what New England has done, and it's not like their defense hasn't contributed. Don't get me wrong, but the way Drake May spreads the ball around, the fact that they have a lot of balance, the fact that they were able to, make some strides on their offensive line, a little banged up there right now at the left tackle spot, but they just go about their business. And they wind up blowing the game to Josh Allen and the Bills, so on. And, it was more about not being able to close the door, and maybe their youth caught up with them a little that day, but then you turn around and Buffalo didn't seize the moment. Okay. Right. So just when they looked like they were getting hot. I find this to be a remarkable season, Pat, because it is not out of the question that by the end of Sunday, we could have 7 new division champions from a year ago. 7. And the team
there's only 8, folks.
Yeah, and again, and the funny thing is, Philly's received a lot of criticism for the way they've played this year, and at times they've really looked less than ordinary. But it's not out of the question they might be the only team that wins their division in back-to-back years, which is really ironic because no one has won the NFC East in back-to-back years in more than 2 decades.
Crazy.
Yeah.
With all the success they've had. That's the pro football guru, Russell Baxter. Russell, it's going to be a wonderful weekend. I'm looking forward to Saturday. Schedule makers got it right once again.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And cap it off Sunday night with, one way or another, it's going to be entertaining. Maybe it'll be a dumpster fire. Maybe it'll be the Steelers fans are going to be going, like you said, one way or another, the Steelers fans are going to be going crazy. So, and I do think no matter what happens, I feel like this is Mike Tomlin's last regular season game, and I think it's Aaron Rodgers' last regular season game in Pittsburgh. I could see Rodgers coming out of retirement mid-season or maybe in a year or two, but I don't know. There's something about the way he's been going about it. So that'll be fun to watch, too. One of the all-time great quarterbacks. And depending on who you talk to, one of the great coaches. Just don't talk to anybody in Pittsburgh who's a fan. If he's
very true. Hey, 11 men have 200 career head coaching victories in the NFL. Mike Tomlin's one of them. That's got to be said for something. Of course, everybody fires back and said, "What about his playoff record?" I get all that, and so on. He won with Bill Cowher's team. That's the other thing you hear as well. But I'll leave it at this. Sunday night has a Hulk Hogan, Andre Giant feel to it.
Oh, wow. The irresistible force versus the immovable object.
Yes, it's got a WrestleMania 3 feel to it. So
he's just sucking up. He just knows that that's one of my favorites of all time. No, I'm kidding.
Uh-huh.
Russell, great to talk with you, and enjoy. And we'll catch up next week as we get ready for the playoffs.
You got it. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. See you next year.
Yes.
Thanks for watching the Pat Imig Sports Network, powered by Imig.ai. For exclusive sports content and clips you can't find anywhere else, follow along on social media at GetPissin'.
Every single night, from the tip off to the touchdown, I break it down. Sports talk royalty, I wear the crown. Dynasties rise, legacies never fall. Every win got a story, I tell it all. Last minute buzzer beaters, ice in the vein. Post game speeches and champagne rain. From the World Cup heat to the Super Bowl lights, calling plays in the zone.